What's up, everybody? It's Greg Birch with Delta Financial, and this is the Be the Difference podcast. This podcast is all about making you a better person in your life and in your business with coaching on sales, leadership, mindset, marketing, everything under the sun when it comes to being an entrepreneur. And we bring on guest speakers. Today, I've got the honor and pleasure of welcoming Mr. Joe Evangelisti. Joe. What's going on, brother? How are you?
What's up, Gregory? Thanks for having me on, brother. Appreciate you.
It is my pleasure. It's my pleasure, man. So, so that the listeners, the viewers know exactly a little bit about you, I'm going to kind of introduce you. Joe was once known as the Flip King. Joe Evangelisti is now the host of the Legacy Blueprint podcast, a leading expert in real estate investing, specifically in the self-storage industry. After experiencing burnout from chasing single and multifamily deals, Joe walked away from his wildly successful flipping empire and transitioned to the world of self-storage. Today, Joe's mission is to show others how to tap into the massive opportunities hidden inside the self-storage industry, opportunities that require far less time, less risk, and exponentially more profits than any other industry within real estate. In addition to the storage syndicate, Joe also serves as the CEO of 3, 7, and 8-figure companies. Prior to building his business, the real estate empire, Joe served in the military as a builder in the U.S. Navy Seabees. That's friggin' fantastic. I love the Seabees. He holds letters of commendation from the U.S. Navy and the White House, a letter of appreciation from President Clinton, and numerous service medals. Joe lives with his wife, Ashley, and their 2 girls in beautiful Haddonfield, New Jersey. Joe, that's awesome, man. That's a great bio, brother. I love it.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
So how long do you serve for? You serve for
just about 6 years.
Yeah,
6 years? The Seabees is a 5-year term, and I got extended for an advanced builder school that I went to. So
okay.
Yeah, just about 6 years.
Yeah, the Seabees. So for those of you that don't know, pretty much anything, especially when I was deployed, anything that was built was just about built by the Navy Seabees. Mm-hmm. Basically all of our, especially we used to have the hex or the what are they called? The barriers that are filled with dirt. I want to say hex barriers or something like that. It's been
it's something like that. I don't think I ever messed with those.
Yeah, so they would come in. They would basically build our infrastructure when we were deployed, especially when we had hard standing buildings, and basically made our way of life a little bit better. So I thank you for as a fellow military member and deploying to Iraq and Afghanistan. I know the work that you probably put in when you were serving. So thank you.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it. Thanks for your service as well.
Oh man, my pleasure. So Joe, tell us a little bit about. The bio is great, but let's dig into the dirty. Let's dig into the weeds.
Yeah.
Tell us about yourself. You know your military service, your experiences, and then the transition out of there into becoming an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it all kind of really started, Greg, when I was a kid. I was I was like a product of construction. My dad was a general contractor. He was a drywall contractor turned home builder by the time I was in my teenage years. And my parents were divorced, so at a really young age, my dad would get me on nights and weekends, and I would just cruise around to different projects with him. And I love the idea of turning something into nothing, or turning nothing into something, right? Whether it was a renovation or an addition or a new home being built. And my dad was also, the first entrepreneur in my family. Before him, his parents came over on the boat from Sicily, and they always had W-2 jobs. And my dad was the first guy in the family to say, you know what, I'm going to go out and start my own thing. I'm going to start my own business. College really wasn't his thing, and so he wanted to go out on his own and do something. And he turned it into a really, really successful general contracting company. So prior to high school, if you would have asked me, my dream would have been to grow up and take over his company and, run the family business. But, things kind of escalated really quickly after I got out of the military and started flipping houses in a lucky year of 2007. I don't know if you're familiar with the
I am very familiar. That was the year I bought my first home.
It actually, ironically, was the year I bought my first home, but I think I bought 4 homes that year, 2 or 3 to flip and then 1 to live in. And I learned a lot of hard lessons, a lot of course correction, a lot of pivoting, but I call it the luckiest time ever to get involved, because if you can learn how to be sufficient and effective in 2007, you can pretty much do it in any market.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I actually did recorded a podcast about dominating in difficult times. Like if you
Mm-hmm.
can learn and you can grow, and I mean, you're going to get bumps and bruises along the way, but if you can still execute consistently and get through that difficult time, man, you're going to dominate when times
Yeah.
are easy, when times get better.
Yeah, and it's almost like vice versa. I heard someone say during COVID, like adversity often forces us to do things that we probably should have been doing all along.
Yes.
That during the easy times, you take it for granted. But when the world changes and we start to get these obstacles put in our way, I think only the stronger survive, and they're going to look for a way to round that obstacle, over, through it, around it, over, or, whatever they got to do to get around it,
Mm.
to create opportunity on the backside of that thing. And I think the challenge for a lot of business owners is they're just really stuck in, this is what I do, and it's the only thing I do, and there's no way to do it differently. And unfortunately, that's not how life works.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now so you started doing, that flipping right out of high school.
No, actually, I did it out of the military, right? So right out
Okay.
of high
Right out of the
school,
military, right out of the military. Okay.
yeah, right out of high school, I actually did a semester in community college, and I quickly realized that wasn't for me.
Mm.
And I was actually working for my dad's travel contracting company at the time, and the foreman who was in charge of me was actually a retired senior chief Seabee. And at the time, I knew I wanted to serve my country, but I also knew I kind of wanted to be an entrepreneur sometimes. So I wasn't really sure how that was going to work. And I loved construction. And I was going into the Marine Corps at the time. I actually went to the recruiting office a few times, and I came back one day and told him that, and he was like, "There's no way you're going to the Marine Corps. Like you're a Seabee. Like let me introduce you to the recruiter." And it kind of all went downhill from there. I met with the Navy recruiter. Of course, the recruiter had no idea what I was talking about, so I kind of had to explain it to him. People don't realize how small the Seabees is. It's a very, very small group of
It is a very
individuals
small. Mhm.
inside of a big Navy. But yeah, so I went in the military right after, just about after high school, and then after a couple years of service, I ended up coming home and starting to flip houses.
Dude, how serendipitous is it that the person that you were working for at the time happened to be a previous Navy
Listen,
Seabee that kind of
yeah,
led you down that path, right? Like it's just
yeah.
like the everything conspiring for you to do the thing that you're doing now, to go on that path of being in business within construction.
Yeah, no, I'm a real, I'm a big believer. In God puts these opportunities in your way. I mean, we still have to take advantage of them, and you got to take the risk sometimes, and you got to seize the opportunity. But there's always something put in our way. It's just a question of whether we perceive it as an obstacle or an opportunity.
Mm.
And in that stage of my life, I had this calling to want to serve, and I was just like, man, how lucky is it that I can go build stuff while I'm serving my country?
Yeah, absolutely. Some people could have looked at that situation and been like, "No, man, I wanted to be a Marine," and like still like go down the path of Marine. How
Yeah.
different would your life be right now? You know?
Quite a bit different. I'm not knocking my Marine brothers, but man, I think I
Yep.
got a little bit more life skill,
Yeah,
building stuff than shooting stuff.
absolutely, man. Absolutely. So you come out
Yeah.
of the military, you do your time, you come out of the military,
Hmm.
and you start flipping houses.
Hmm.
From flipping houses to actually to becoming the flip king, how does that happen? What are some of the challenges that you went through and the lessons you had to learn, the bumps and
Yeah.
bruises along the way as a brand new entrepreneur?
So many lessons. I mean, it was 12 years of just really grinding, and we're still grinding. Let's face it, we've traded into the self storage industry, and every day is still a challenge. And I think that's the thing about being a business owner, is every day there is a challenge.
Yeah.
If there's not, then maybe something's not working right. But in the single family world, 2007 was my first lesson, right? I got into our first two or three deals, and I did them the old fashioned way, meaning I took all of my savings from the 6 years of service that I had saved up, and I started buying houses 20% down. Now I had a partner with me at the time, but we only got about three houses deep when 2008 hit, and the market just came out from underneath of us. And so we were sitting on these three properties at the time, and I had 20% down on all of them. And lucky enough, I didn't just have one exit strategy. I knew, God forbid, something changes, we could rent these things out. So that's what we had to do. We had to put tenants in place. We had to stabilize the asset. I had to go back to the same bank we had a construction loan with and beg them to give us long-term financing, which they did. Ironically, I just had a refinance with that same banker like 2 weeks ago. It's the first time I've seen him in 10 years. But that guy helped us stabilize these assets. But the problem was the bank's not going to give you your capital back, right? So they gave us enough money to cover the mortgage note that was a short-term construction loan, and then stabilize it for a long-term loan. But we still had no cash. Like we didn't make anything. We just kept these assets. So I had to learn to pivot. And, of course, I started bartending nights and weekends. I went and got my real estate license. I started figuring out how to flip these houses, and acquire them, at a lower value. And, within probably a year and a half of 2008, short sales started happening, foreclosures started happening. So, there's always a good time to buy as long as you're buying properly with the right terms. And, it taught us that we had to start using OPM, other people's money, right? I had to start getting private lenders to help us scale this thing up. And so, we just learned so many things along the way. I just think that a lot of times you have to do it, as right as you think it is, or as right as you think is possible, before you learn how to really start to dial things in. So, just put one foot in front of the other and learn as you go.
Absolutely. And the thing about, I feel like when it comes to entrepreneur, I was actually having a conversation with my COO the other day, and being an entrepreneur is
Mhm.
like walking a really shitty path, right?
Yeah.
Like and like it's a straightforward path, right? It's
Mhm.
like, and like as you're walking and you're in the middle of nowhere, it's deserted, the road sucks, it's like kind of treacherous. There's big obstacles in the way, and it's a like uncomfortable rocky where the rocks are a little bit too big, and you keep twisting your ankle, and you're just like, man, this sucks. But as you
Mhm.
go along, it gets better. It gets a little bit nicer. There's a little bit more lush scenarios, but all along that path, you have these, it's like these people coming out on the path that are trying to like carpetbaggers. They're like, hey, you know what? Hey, the path curves up ahead, right?
Yeah.
I can show you a shortcut here. If
Yeah.
this is going to cost you this, but I'm going to show you the shortcut. They take your money, you get lost in the woods, you dangle around in there until you finally realize that there's no
Yep.
shortcut. You get back to the path and you kind of suck it up, or you stay out there forever and you end up going back to a W-2 job, and you're like, it's like, man, I'm out, and you quit. You lose the
Mhm.
will or the resources to stay in the game.
Yep.
And I love that in terms of an entrepreneur story, starting off when it's like the most challenging, right? And you
Yeah.
still found a way that, like, hey, you're having all these challenges come to you. You're like in the thicket of the worst friggin' path to go on. And you're like, okay, well, what's the solution here? How do we stay on this
Yeah.
path? And that's
Yeah.
super
No.
inspiring for people.
Yeah, well, I think that's really like the entrepreneur's journey, right? Like I used to have this analogy. I would give this speech, and I talked about Conor McGregor. Like, why is he like the most prolific, UFC fighter? Maybe not the best fighter, but he's obviously two-time champion. And the thing about Conor that makes him special is he's not afraid to lose. Like this
Mhm.
guy's not undefeated. He comes into the match, he gets choked out, he breaks his leg, he gets knocked out. There's a million ways, but yes, he comes back. But yet he comes back,
Mhm.
and he's entertaining, and he tells a good story, and he comes from a good story. And I think that's the thing about entrepreneurs, is we have to get used to getting punched in the face, and bouncing back and doing it again.
That
And
resiliency.
then just the resiliency of being able to get back in the ring. I think that's what makes us a quote unquote successful entrepreneur, is that they're not afraid to fail and kind of reinvent themselves and do it again and do something else and do something different and, scale up.
Absolutely. Andy Frisella, I'm big. I don't know if you know who Andy Frisella is or you follow.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm a big Andy Frisella fan. And he talks about like entrepreneurship is basically just like putting your hand on a stoveplate, and like you get burned, you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to put my hand on stoveplates like that, but you have to be willing to continue to put your hand on these stoveplates. And as you go along, the stoveplates change, they look different. You don't know if they're on or off, and it's a constant learning process. It doesn't matter how far along you get, you're constantly evolving and learning. You're having challenges, just like how you said earlier. So
Mhm.
no, I agree completely. I think kind of the reference to Conor McGregor, that's a good point, that he's he's doesn't care about failing. He doesn't care
Mhm.
about that temporary loss, because he's just going to keep getting up. He's like keep
It's just a
getting back
stepping
in the
stone.
game.
Yeah.
So you start flipping houses.
Mhm.
When's the moment that you become the flip king? Like what happens?
So I don't know that I ever had a moment. I remember when the moniker came out. It was I had I'd probably flipped 200 or 300 houses by then at that point, and I was having a meeting with my mentor, and he was like, "We need a marketing. We need a name. We needed something that's catchy."
Yeah.
And he gave me that, and then he's like, "You're the Flip King. We should just call you the Flip King." That's kind of where it all kind of started. But the reality of it is, I think there's a lot of people think there's a lot of ego behind it. It's more the confidence of being able to say, like, I've done enough of these things that I'm the king at this, and I can do it. Not only that it's just about me either, it was helping others learn how to do those processes and systems and things that we put into place. I mean, we came damn near hitting 100 a year by the time we had wrapped it up. And not for nothing, that's a lot of transactions. It's a lot of energy, a lot of team, a lot of time, a lot of focus, a lot of lost sleep, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety to try to get to that kind of volume. And I think the reality of it is we learned towards the end that we just weren't passionate about it anymore. It was always just about, are these closings happening on Friday? What's going on with the mortgage commitment, or the inspection items done, or the repairs done? And it just became transactional every single week. And so what I really wanted to do was I wanted to find something that was more scalable, that we could, maybe it'd have more zeros, but it was less spread out all over the place. I mean, we were doing 40 to 50 projects all over South Jersey at any given time, and 3 hours in any direction. So I wanted something that we could control more. And so the reality of it is, self-storage is a much more scalable, kind of easy to develop asset class. It's concrete, steel, and asphalt. We're building steel boxes,
Yeah.
with doors on them for people to put their stuff in. So, the numbers are much, much higher, but the reality of it is we could do one self-storage deal and make more money than we made doing 100 houses. So then it became, okay, well, how do we get this working? How do we bring our investors on board? How do we make everybody kind of make more money, and get equity in the asset that we're going to build? Because that's the other thing. I kind of felt shallow all those years flipping houses, because it was private money, but it was like you would lend me money and I would give it back to you a year later, and I'd give you interest. And then I'd say, okay, what do you want to do? I'll take it again. Go do another one. And so we weren't really building equity for anybody. It was transactional. I was just cash in, cash out.
Mhm.
And so I was lucky enough that I saved a couple properties before we got out of the business. But now I have the ability to give my investors the ability to ride along with equity. So when they give us money, not only do they get a return on their asset, but they also get other capital, but they also get part of equity in a potentially $20 million asset.
So are you selling when you build? I assume that sounds like you guys are actually constructing and building storage
Yeah.
facility locations. Are you selling
Mhm.
it to a company that actually comes in and manages it? Or are you guys also doing the management piece, or working with the company to do the management piece?
Yeah. It's even better than that. We're keeping it and letting them manage it. So, what a lot of people don't realize is, like, your Cube Smarts and Extra Space and Life Storage. Well, besides Life Storage, they own most of their stuff. But like Cube Smart, for example, they only own 60% of their assets. So when you drive by a Cube Smart with that big red sign outside,
Yeah.
there's a 40% chance there's a guy like me that owns that property. So that's really our objective, is to build Class A facilities, because we're pure developers. I don't want to be in the management game. I don't want to learn that business. I want to build really good assets, and I want to hand it off to the pros to rent them up and get the tenants in place and manage the day-to-day operations.
Mhm.
It allows us to just be really good at what we do, which is build stuff. But yeah, everything we build is going to be a Class A facility, something that one of the REITs, like I just mentioned, is going to manage for us.
Yeah, and depending upon the size of the location, where it's like a 300 storage all the way up to like 1,000 storage unit location, that's a
Hmm.
lot of income that's coming in every single month with the different promotions and the different
Yeah,
sizes so I used to work at public storage a long time ago.
there you go.
Yeah.
You know,
So I was a district manager for public storage. So I saw the numbers for every single location, and you could have close to $1 million per month coming in rent every single month for a location. And if you have
yeah,
that split between, like, hey, the company's managing it, this is what their piece is, hey, this is the owners of the property and the investors that came in, and you can have a lot of equity that you can build in order to grow and expand and get other locations. That's fantastic.
you're catching on. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly what we do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And how you've been doing the storage facility. How long has that been? When did you guys make that transition?
About 3.5 years ago, maybe 4 years. I'm approaching 4 years. It was pre-COVID,
Okay.
and we were trying to decide, like, what kind of asset class we want to get into. I knew I wanted to be in commercial. I wanted to get something that was bigger and scalable. And one of my good buddies is Tim Bratz, and he runs this group called Commercial Empire, and they do mostly apartment complexes.
Mm.
So I went to one of his events, and I was standing in that room, and there was like 400 people in the room, all learning how to do acquisitions on multifamily. And I thought, I'm a blue ocean guy. If you're familiar with the blue ocean strategy, like I don't want to be where the sharks are feeding. I want to go do something else.
Yeah.
And so I left that room and I was like, man, I love multifamily, but I don't want to be involved where there's going to be 100 LOIs going in on an asset on a deal. I'd rather, figure out a blue ocean strategy. And so I had a conversation with a friend of mine, now become really close with, and he kind of had the same background. He had built planned unit developments and restaurants and stuff all up and down the East Coast. And at the time I talked to him, he was on his fourth facility. And he said to me, Joe, once you build a self-storage project, you'll never touch a house again. Like you'll pay someone to build your own house. You're never going to touch residential again. And let me tell you, he was right. It's just a night and day difference of, you know, um, I'm not going to say it's easy. It's just simple. And
Yeah.
simple isn't always easy, but it's a hell of a lot less complex than picking out, tiles and countertops and paint colors and trim and what fixtures are going to go in the bathroom and what kind of ceiling fan is going on 50 to 100 different projects where we design one of these things and the design is done. I mean, I could plant one of my projects anywhere in the country and they look almost the same. And they're virtually, aside from layout and, value engineering the use of the space, the exterior looks like a legacy product. And that's kind of how we started out. So, there's not a whole lot of design that goes into it. Now it's just more layout and efficiencies.
I always when I was working in public storage a long time ago, I always I felt like, man, I'd like to invest and like build up enough cash flow that I can just purchase one
Hmm.
or like finance one and eventually own it and then
Yeah.
just like have another company manage it for me and just
Yeah.
take it because you can get a lot you have a lifetime of income with a couple of storage first facilities and be very, very wealthy when
That's
it
the
comes to
goal.
storage facilities.
Yeah. That's the
So
goal.
any kind of corporate real estate, even if you do a small, like I knew a guy that when I was working in the storage unit space, he had a large warehouse that was just a massive warehouse. There was nothing
Hmm.
special about it. It was
Hmm.
just a tin building,
Yeah.
and he rented it out to Walmart and Amazon and somewhere else for them to store and use it just to store product.
Hmm.
And he made from them renting it out, he brought in like $60,000 a month, and he did nothing.
It's not chump change.
Yeah, it's not. It's like
It's not
it's
chump
just like,
change.
dude, he was making and he did
Hmm.
nothing. It was one property, and it was actually gifted to him by his dad.
Yeah.
And so I was
I
like, dude,
love it.
that's fantastic. Corporate real estate's where it's at.
It's absolutely where it's at, especially with the right leases in the right places.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
yeah. So you start doing the storage space gig, right? And where do you start doing the storage syndicate and you start your podcast? When does this come in?
Storage Syndicate is only 10 months old. We have about 100 people, 100 members. I think it's like 98 last time I checked. And the syndicate was built just like that. Like what was a syndicate back in the day? It was like basically the mob bosses coming together, and they were in competition, but they would be like, you get the trash contract and you get the concrete contract, and you do, and basically work the competitors that are working together for a common good.
Yeah.
Right. So, we have designers in there, we have subcontractors, we have some of the nation's best builders, GCs. Of course, we have developers like myself who are looking to buy deals. We have private lenders, accredited investors, mostly, obviously, at this level. And it becomes like a hodgepodge of putting everybody together in the right room. It's pretty magical. We did our first live event in Vegas back in September, and just seeing people sit around the table and kind of shoot the shit and be like, okay, well, I'm an investor, I'm a developer, I'm a bird dog, I'm trying to find deals, and really just meshing it all together. Because the beauty of most, like you said, like corporate assets or commercial assets, is there's enough to go around.
Mm,
And that's the beauty of it. A lot of people can make money and make good money without being overly greedy by helping other people kind of help them. So
yeah.
as long as you're bringing value to one of these deals, there's no reason, in my opinion, you can't squeak out a couple points of equity that will be worth a lot of money in 5 to 10 years. And do that a few times a year, and that's a massive retirement plan.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you I like the idea of doing a syndicate in that way. Like most people like nowadays would do a syndicate, just like bringing everyone together to do like basically a mastermind, right?
Yeah.
But doing it in that sense was like, hey, instead of let's all competing,
Yep.
let's kind of divvy this up and work together and help each other.
Yeah, and we've been very successful at it. Just in the last 18 months, we've had five different people that had zero real estate experience get 3 to 5% equity in a $20 million plus deal just by finding the land or finding the asset to start with. And then we've had three other development teams buy shovel ready deals. Basically permit ready, go out there, start construction. And those three guys are guys that have never done self storage before. They came from the single family world. They did fix and flip or some new construction houses, but have never done commercial. So it's cool to see people kind of level up and scale up and be committed to a better outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, and so what about the podcast? How did that start?
Podcast is a evolution of years. I mean, we've been doing it now for, I don't know, a few years, 5, 6, 7 years. And, it started out early on talking about flipping single family homes, wholesaling single family homes, all that kind of good stuff. But it really evolved into, I started interviewing just really, really exceptional business leaders from all different walks of life. And kind of diving into almost what we're doing here, Greg, is like diving into like your favorite failures. And, what are the things that you thought were going to be a setback, but they really set you up for success, or, major occurrences that happen in your business that you didn't expect, but, in hindsight, they were good for you. Because I think we all have those things, where it's like, man, the sky is falling. This is the worst case scenario ever. And then you wake up 3 years from now and you're like, man, thank God that happened because it forced me to do this thing that really forced me to get to this level.
It's all the
I think
perspective.
it's all perspective. And I think a lot of business owners, it's hard. I listened to, I don't want to get on a tangent here, but I listened to Ed Milet did a private interview for one of the mastermind groups that I'm in. And I was watching the interview yesterday. And he goes through all these amazing names. And he mentioned Frizella and like all these other guys that he interviewed. And he said, you know what all these people have in common? And of course, the audience was like, one of the people were like, all of them had really tough childhoods. And he was like, man, I never thought about it that way, but you're right. A lot of them had really tough childhoods. He said, actually, the commonality between like the majority of people I talk to and I interview, the commonality is like depression, right? Because it's funny. It's like I call it psychological warfare. And you alluded to it earlier, but when you're a business owner, sometimes it's lonely. Sometimes you don't know who to talk to. Sometimes you're dealing with challenges that seem insurmountable, and then somehow you come out on the other side.
Yep.
And what we don't recognize as business owners a lot of times is that our bad days are can be a lot different than a lot of people's bad days. There's a lot more pressure and stress and weight on your shoulder when you have hundreds of families to feed in a given week, and you're trying to overcome some kind of challenge. So that's the kind of thing that I lean into with business owners is really, when I'm doing coaching, especially, it's mindset, it's focus, it's opportunity or problem, really trying to keep our mindset straight so that we can become really good leaders and coaches for our people.
Mm. And for your coaching program that you do for Legacy Builder Executive Coaching, is there any specific industry that you're coaching, or is it just business owners, any kind of entrepreneur?
No, I would say like 90% of my folks are real estate centric. I mean, I have a couple doctors and an attorney, and I have people that are outside the real estate world. They don't do it full time, but the
Yeah.
idea is I want to become a better business owner, operator, family man, father, husband. But ultimately, I want to create an asset or an investment where I can start to build up alternative investments. I'm making lots of money as a surgeon, but I don't know what to do with it, type of thing. So I think it's kind of real estate centric, but that doesn't mean that they have to be in the real estate industry.
Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. So speaking on challenges and failures that we face as business owners,
Mhm.
what's one of the biggest challenges that you've ever faced? Tell that story and how you overcame it.
So I'm going to tell a silly. It's going to sound silly because in retrospective, it's very silly. But at the time, I thought the sky was crashing on top of me. This is going back years. I bought a piece of ground for almost $500,000, a building lot in our town, which at the time was far and away the most expensive piece of dirt I had ever purchased. We were buying building lots for $100,000 in different cities, and we took a risk to build this kind of like mansion. Let's for lack of a better term. And the guys were outside excavating the project, and we were doing this. we were doing these foundation walls called superior walls. They're like precast concrete walls. So all they have to do is like dig the hole real quick, put stone down, and then drop the walls.
Mm.
And literally, the guys were out there with the excavator digging. The walls are going to show up in 2 days, and we already paid the deposit to get the walls to show up, and it's like non-refundable. And of course, I'm into the lot for $500,000, and we get a phone call, and the excavator's like, "Guys, you need to come out here and see this." I'm like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "Oh man, what did he find?" Right? He unearthed like the world's largest underground oil tank. Like I'd never seen anything like this before in my life. I think it was 1,500 gallons. It was the size of my office that I'm sitting in right now, and it was under the foundation. So of course we're freaking out because if you know anything about you know environmental contaminants and things like that, I wouldn't buy a piece of dirt that had an underground oil tank just because of how dangerous the environmental impact could be and the cost. I mean, it could cost millions of dollars depending on how far the oil went into the earth and everything.
Yeah.
So immediately, like my whole world came to an end. I was like, holy cow, this is not gonna end well. Like, what are we gonna do about this tank? So call our attorney first because we're like, what are our options? You know what I mean? Like, not that I was going to try to do anything illegal, but your first thought is like, dig that thing up out of the ground, get rid of it. Like maybe no one knows it's there. And my attorney's like, you absolutely cannot do that. Do not do that. You're
Look
going
the
to
other
prison if
way.
you do that. And I was like, I know. I wasn't going to do it. I was just thinking of options. And he said, no, you got to call the building inspector, man, and just fess up to it and see what the consequences are. So we get the building inspector on the phone, and he goes, oh yeah, I know about that tank. It was abandoned in '96. It was abandoned properly. They filled it with sand. You could just take it out. It's like trash underground. We're here like losing our minds, and I'm thinking I'm filing bankruptcy because I have a 1,500-gallon oil tank underground. And I'm going to create an environmental impact in this area. And here, this thing had been abandoned properly, and he's like, just literally pull it out of the ground and throw it away. It was abandoned properly. So
I bet you the time frame just felt like an eternity.
It was a heart attack.
I'm over.
Yeah, it was a heart attack moment. It was about 2 or 3 hours one afternoon that I'll never forget because it just goes to show no matter how good a due diligence and design and process and construction is a world of problem solving. Like I talk to our investors and they're like, what's the risk? I'm like, there's risks every day. Like we solve problems for a living. There's supply chain issues, labor issues, parts showing up wrong. Like this is what we do. We solve problems every single day. And no matter how good your due diligence is, you're still going to come across stuff every once in a while you just can't find.
And that's kind of like
that's the risk.
That's literally any industry as an entrepreneur, small business owner.
Yep.
You can do all the due diligence you want, but you better be Semper Gumby, bro. You better be really willing to react on the fly and be like, okay, how are we going to do this?
100%.
Yep. So, awesome, man. So when it comes to being an entrepreneur, everything that you've learned and being this business owner, and you've amassed a ton of success. What's the one thing that you look back that you're like, man, if I'd have known this when I started, I would have accelerated my progress so much more?
That's a tough one, man, because I really truly believe that God puts obstacles in our way exactly when they're supposed to be there, and those things are keeping us on track to learn the next thing to get us here today. And
yes.
None of that stuff could have been like fast forwarded through. I mean, in a different world, if you had hindsight, could you go back and like just fill in the lottery ticket and put the winning Powerball? No, yeah, you could do.
But you wouldn't have got the experience.
But you wouldn't have got the experience.
That's a great way to answer that question.
Well, I mean, the reality of it is that they say 95 or 98% of Powerball winners are broke in 2 years. I mean, you get $1 billion. And if you didn't have the wherewithal, the knowledge, the experience, the trials, the tribulation, you don't know how to manage that kind of money.
Yeah.
And if I didn't know how to manage it back when I had single families or learn how to do that, I certainly wouldn't be able to do it today. And so I really believe that we're all where we're supposed to be based on the decisions we made. And that's that.
I love that. That's a very insightful way to look at it. And you're absolutely right. That's exactly how it should be. Looking at my journey right now, I started as a brand new agent, and over time I became an agency owner and as like sales manager, then agency owner, and started my own kind of company. And then now I own an IMO. And I tell people all the time, like the only reason like I have bigger fires that hit me on a daily basis that would have crumbled me on day one. I would have been like, oh, I'm out. I'm out. Like it would but because I went through the challenges at every single level, it like built my resiliency and it built my experience and my knowledge base. And with each level I hit, there was still challenges that were unique and different, but they increased in volume and intensity. And
Yeah.
so now I'm having things hit me like on a daily basis that I'm like, again, like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. But here's the thing, the things that hit you today, if they hit you 5 years ago, you would have quit.
oh, I have 100%. I'd have been like,
You would
nope,
have quit.
this is not for me.
Because I look back and I think about stuff that was 5, 10 years ago that almost had me quitting, that I look back now and I laugh about, like, that was a joke. I can't even believe that was a problem. Like, that wouldn't even bother me. So again, I think we all grow at that pace. We have to go through the fire in order to understand the repercussions of our decisions.
Man, and to grow and
Hmm.
and to reference your story, you talk about like that, that oil tank and your reaction to it, right?
Yeah.
And so my mentor, he's like high up in insurance,
Hmm.
and he started as an agent too. He's been in insurance for 35 years. He's like 9 figures worth,
Hmm.
very wealthy, but he's just a super down to earth guy, right? And so I had this situation happen, and every single time I do, I'm like literally text him like, "Bro, you got a minute? I got to talk to you." And he calls me, and he's like,
Yep.
"What's up?" And so I always tell him like, "Hey, this is going on." He's just very calm. He's like, "Oh, okay, no, that's fine. Don't even worry about that. Like, this is
Hmm.
what you're gonna do." And he's just very calm about it.
Yep.
And so I had a situation happen where he like heard it out, and he's like, "Greg, let me tell you something." He's like, "You know what the difference is between being an entrepreneur in your 30s and being an entrepreneur in your 50s?" I was like, "What's that?" He was like, "You learn to just take a day and let it sit for a second." He's like,
Yep.
"Because the way that you're going to react to it right now is probably going to be a lot different than the way that you react to it tomorrow." He's like,
Hmm.
"Let it sit for a day. Just sit on it."
I
He
love
was
that.
like, and he's like, "Because you're not like you may react too quickly and emotionally and actually make it worse. It may solve itself. Like, you don't know."
100%.
And so,
Yeah.
and he talks about the patience that you build over time as you get older and just been in the business for long enough. And man, was he right. Man, was he because like looking back on that problem, like it's not that big of a deal. When it happened, I felt like I was like, oh my goodness, like what's gonna happen with my company?
Hmm.
Oh man, like this is bad. Like, and now I look back, I'm like, it wasn't that big of a deal.
But in business specifically, I mean, look, it's different. If your kid gets hurt on the playground, like, you're stopping what you're doing, you're going to handle it right away, right? But in
Exactly.
business, I find the bigger fire, the more 911, I need you to call me right now emergencies are usually the ones that put themselves out the quickest.
Yeah.
It's like if you give that an hour or two to breathe, you circle back, hey man, I'm so sorry, I was on a podcast. What can I do to help? They're like, no, I took care of it. Oh, okay. I guess it really wasn't 911 after all. It's like I think that the more people are urgent about needing your attention, those are the people that really ought to figure out how to put problems and put fires out themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, man, I appreciate you coming on and just chatting with me and also just sharing your experience and teaching everyone a little bit about what you do and the world of real estate investment. Um, One question I ask all my guests in the
Okay.
closing, and the question is, if you had the opportunity to break bread, sit down with, learn, pick their brain, learn everything about them from anybody in history, dead or alive, top three people, who would they be?
That's a crazy one. I think Andy's up there. I'd love to have lunch with Andy Frisella.
Dude,
I'm not.
he's my number one. I want to
Yeah.
go I want to go break bread and bump fists and just like pick his brain because I know he's got like
Yeah.
big plans and I want to be like I mean, I'll sign an NDA. It doesn't go past this room, but I want to know like
Yeah.
what all is going on in that mind, bro.
Yeah, it was funny, man. To talk about him, I mean, this is kind of off topic, but I remember when he first started Ariete, and I thought to myself, I should do that first year because I think there was like 100 people joined the first year,
Yeah.
and these guys were all like, sitting next to Ed and Andy the whole time. And then the next year, they had like 4,000 members, and it completely got watered down.
I'm
And
actually an
so,
RTA myself.
are you? All right. Well,
Yeah.
I was like, man, I wish I was on that first crew because I had a lot of friends that did that, like the year one,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, dude, that's a table to be sitting at. Like that's a cool one.
Oh,
Um,
1000%.
yeah, I think Andy would be one of them. I've always had an affinity for Tony Robbins. I've been to many of his events. I think he'd be a cool guy to hang out with for a couple days. Um, I don't know who would be the third one. That's tough. There's a lot of folks. I know people want to say like Gandhi or something like that, or Nelson Mandela. Like, there's some really cool people in history that have done some really cool stuff. But I think Andy and Tony are the first two that pop into my mind.
Nice. Tony's a good one. I actually get told all the time that I look like Tony Robbins. I probably don't in the
I
face,
can see that. I can
but
see that.
dude, I'm him and I are the same height.
Are you?
I'm like,
I can
I'm
see
a
that.
really tall guy. So like, funny enough, I don't know if you've ever heard of this place. It's a dueling piano bar. It's called Pete's Dueling Piano Bar in Dallas. I don't know if
Okay.
I don't think it's nationwide. I don't know, but it's just a
Yeah.
dueling piano bar. It's a nice
Mhm.
little swanky spot, and they're always like joking around. And so I went there for the first time, and I happened to get there early, so they actually gave me a seat up front. And as people were like starting to pour in, the guy on the piano is just playing random songs, and there's nothing like really going on. They're just playing, and then the guy gets on the mic and he's like, "Hey guys, I don't know if you guys know this, but we have a really special guest in the audience tonight. We got Mr. Tony Robbins," and the spotlight comes right on me. And I'm like, stand up and
Oh,
come on stage, Tony. Come say hi to her. And
oh
so
man.
ever since then, like people are like, dude, you do kind of look like Tony Robbins. So now every time I go back to, there's like 3 different Pete's Doing piano bars in Dallas, I go to that same one. They know me now. So they're like, dude, Tony's back. Tony's back. And
That's
they get
awesome.
me to come on stage. That's pretty cool.
That's incredible. That's a pretty funny story. I like that.
So, Joe, thank you so much for giving us the time and attention. I know that you're a busy man, and it's always a pleasure. Um, for all of you watching, thank you so much. Actually, before I do that, is there, if anyone wants to reach out to you about your coaching, or even just to learn more about like investing, like if they're like, man, I want to invest into these kinds of properties, what's the best way that they could get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can actually get a hold of me both ways for through investwithlegacy.com is our legacy developers page, and there's a spot in there for coaching. There's a spot in there for accredited investors to get involved in deals.
Awesome. And what's the minimum investing amount for anyone
So
else?
we're launching the fund next month. Knock on wood. It's been 10 months in the making, but the fund is going to be live in January. Probably by the time you guys hear this, or it goes live.
This will go live in February.
Oh well, then yeah, you guys will be, the fund might be half full by then if we're lucky. But yeah, the minimum for the fund is 250, and it's a $50 million primarily self storage fund for development around the country.
That's dope. That's dope.
Excited.
Joe, thank you so much for coming on. For those of you watching, thank you so much for participating in the Be the Difference podcast. If you got any value from this, if you learn anything, the best thing you do, especially for Joe and for Legacy, is to share this content so it can get his voice and his story out to more people. They can learn, they can grow. Maybe somebody else that you know needs some coaching and they want to be a part of Joe's group. So share this, put it on your story, put it on your social media. We grow completely by word of mouth. So I need your help to share this and get it out. And I appreciate it. This has been the Be the Difference podcast. I'm your host, Greg Birch. Until next time, we'll see you.